Here are 3 short ideas about boredom, overly sensitive Americans, and teleporters. Idea number 1. Maybe we should be bored more. Since buying the first iPhone in 2007, I can confidently claim I have been less bored. Games to play, books to read, music, internet, always. There is no moment, except for the 0% battery moment, that I can't fill with pixels. But here's the thing. I like being bored. In Why Do We Get Bored, Michael Stevens talks about how boredom superficially might seem childish, trivial, even embarrassing. But I don't know, I'm pretty into it. It's how I reset, organize my thoughts, it's how Idea Channel and Reasonably Sound topics happen. So now that I am constantly avec phone, I find that I have to remind myself to get bored. In that same video, Michael quotes a New York Times piece which says that boredom is important for creativity and mental well-being. And as it turns out, the body of research that supports this kind of statement is only growing. E.g., in a study for the Creative Research Journal from last year, Sandy Mann and Rebecca Cadman found that people doing stereotypically boring tasks had more answers to questions requiring creative thinking, though the answers themselves didn't tend to be more novel, so quantity, not quality, I guess. Inspired by this research, WNYC's New Tech City is conducting a kind of citizen science experiment. They're asking listeners to complete challenges. Don't look at your phone while waiting for the bus, don't take photos for a day, and so on and so forth, to see if they feel more creative as a result. Now, I have the same worry about this that I do for lots of ideas like it, which is that I worry we are giving technology all of the agency by saying it makes us behave certain ways. We've said similar things about books, the internet, and now smartphones. I say we'll be fine. But psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman, in talking with New Tech City, says that we live in an unprecedented time, that the number of things currently vying for our attention can't be compared to the moral panics of yesteryear, that it is fundamentally different. So maybe it is changing who we are. What do you guys think? Is this an unprecedented time? And what's your relationship with boredom? Does your phone factor into that relationship? Do you feel less creative? Idea number 2, why are Americans so sensitive? Idea Channel deals with many social issues: representation, how media can reproduce the ideology of its creators, how to be responsible when making media. We get all of the myopic, ugh, it's just a TV show, or whatever comments that you would expect. But there's another subset that's interesting. One's asking, why are you Americans so sensitive? In this view, the US is the home of political correctness. American liberals are whiny crybabies, Tumblr in action, yada, 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 yada. I don't 100% accept this premise. I find it to be somewhere between caricature and willful misunderstanding, but I will say this. You could maybe claim that Americans, not all of us, but perhaps a disproportionate amount, are concerned with identity politics, the furthering of policies and norms that support the interests of social groups that are or underrepresented. There are lots of reasons for this, and we will never get to all of them. They include things like there just tend to be a lot of Americans online, and so we can dominate conversations. We also have a deeply fractured national identity. Identity factors into our actual governmental policies and our day-to-day interactions with authority. Also in our media, which is generally viewed as being very liberal. But you'd be correct to wonder why some of this is so special. Similar things are true in other countries. Razmeh Kushian, in his book The Left Hemisphere, talks about how the United States history has something to do with it, yes. One of identity politics' central characteristics, says Kushian, is that minority groups identify as such and have no interest in, quote, transforming themselves into the majority. Since the 1960s, America has been the quintessential country, he writes, for this type of thinking. But also, our universities might be a determining factor. Insofar as identity politics is forwarded by academic critical theorists, those theorists find our universities hospitable. Kushian writes that American universities dominate, quote, the higher education and research global market when it comes to finance, publications, and infrastructural facilities. Meaning, given a choice, theorists will come here. Of course, this relies on the premise that identity politics is, in fact, forwarded significantly by academics, a thought that I know at least some people will be super skeptical of. What do you guys think? Why are Americans so sensitive? Is America home in some way to identity politics? And does the university system maybe have something to do with it? And last but not least, idea number 3. Is it you on the other side of the teleporter? So, maybe you've heard this one. You step into a teleporter, your atoms are baked and dissipated into a fine mist, and you are reassembled light years away. All of the same memories, feelings, even that hangnail that you woke up with this morning, just totally new matter. Is that you? It's a good enough question that Star Trek actually went to some lengths to avoid having to answer it. The transporter platforms are actually matter streams, not strict teleportation. The same matter is streamed from point A to point B, so Spock is always Spock. Anyway, most of us would say, yes, that is me on the other side, especially if the first you was destroyed in the process and the machine isn't just making copies. But what if it were? This is a question that Derek Parfit raises in his book Reasons and Persons. Let's say you get into the scanner, but instead of being vaporized here and reassembled on Mars, you're assembled on Mars exactly as expected, an identical you, but you are not vaporized here on Earth. So now there are 2 of you. Furthermore, the resident teleportation doctor gives you some bad news. He says that the malfunction has caused an irreversible heart defect and you will unavoidably die in 2 days. Painless, but still kaput. What then? When we're vaporized and reassembled immediately, Parfit points out, it's easy for us to think of the whole thing as a kind of travel. But put any amount of time between the two, and even though the outcome is the same, saying who is you becomes a little bit more complicated. We usually think of self as dependent upon qualitative and numerical identity, that there is one of us both numerically and distinctively. So either one of those 2 yous is somehow more you, even though they are both perfectly identical, or Leibniz's law, which states that no 2 things can have exactly the same characteristics, is wrong. Which maybe it is anyways. Hashtag quantum mechanics. Anyway, before you get so high up on your horse I can't hear you scoffing, allow me to explain why this kind of thing is important even though we don't teleport. First, ideas of what constitute the self, physical body, brain stuff, relationships, a soul, factor pretty heavily into policy, law, and pretty much any infrastructural expression of order and authority. If there's a chance that technology is going to challenge those ideas, then it's probably a good idea to give it a think before we're in the future weeds. And second, for Parfit, this has great personal and moral consequences. For him, this thought experiment cements identity as being non-determinate, which, to put it very, very crassly, is kind of like saying sometimes we are not ourselves. Cue I Heart Huckabees.
How am I not myself?
Or that our self is not always exactly one and the same thing. The most important self part, he says, is something he calls relation R, psychological connectedness and or continuity. Things like relationships, shared experiences, and psychological features. That is self. Parfit sees this as comforting because, as he writes, quote, instead of saying a person suffering will be me, I should say there will be suffering that will be related in certain ways to these present experiences. See? Very comforting. Furthermore, if we consider self as consisting mostly of this relation R, don't we have that with lots of things? Not the least of which being our future selves and future generations? Relation R exists with second teleporter self because of some malfunction, but Parfit says no matter what the cause, relation R is significant. Whatever we have psychological connectedness and or continuity with, teleporter self, future generations, we have a moral obligation to treat it the same way that we would treat our selves. What do you guys think? After the teleporter malfunction, is one of those yous more you than the other? And why? Let us know in the comments, and if you are making multiple yous, if you could ask all of them to please subscribe to Idea Channel, that would be grand. You know what they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder who might be looking at themselves in the mirror. Let's see what you had to say about makeup and makeup tutorials. First things first, next week's episode of Idea Channel is going to come out 1 day late, not on Wednesday, but on Thursday, because we're involved in a collab with a bunch of other channels about gender politics and gender roles. So we're super excited about that. So this is your fair warning. Next week, Idea Channel, not Wednesday, but Thursday. Crystal Gong writes a really great comment that ends with the idea that, makeup might be empowering, but for some people it might be a blessing and a curse if they only feel normal when they're wearing makeup, and that, if that comes sort of as an effect of commercial pressure or community pressure or some kind of guilt that's occurring, you sort of move out of this empowerment zone and into this possibly really dangerous area. And of course, that's something that I have no experience with, as she puts very well, for me, putting on makeup, it's kind of like fancy, like I have a fancy face on, but for people who wear it every day, you can develop this really complicated relationship to it. This is a great comment, so thank you for writing this. Relatedly, Bearse talks about the two sides of community that develop around makeup, and that if there is an in-group, right, there will be an out-group, and that whenever there's knowledge traveling between people, it runs a risk that that the in-group in possession of it will sort of lord it over the out-group, that it will become status. And yeah, I can't empathize with this exactly, but I can empathize with the general situation of not wanting to get involved in something because there is a group of people who you sort of are afraid will make it a big deal, and that kind of ruins it or makes it harder for you to enjoy it. And yeah, not with makeup specifically, of course, I don't know, but to a certain degree, I can absolutely empathize. Dark-skinned Divas, who creates makeup content for YouTube, expands on some of the ideas relating race and cosmetics from the last episode, and talks about how since a lot of cosmetic companies don't make product for women with her skin tone, that there's an importance for a community to come together to try to solve these problems so that women with darker skin tone can, use product, can feel, can look the way that they feel that they want to. And I really love this idea of a community of people forming to solve the problems of a commercial industry that would ideally solve it themselves, but, for a million complicated reasons won't. And I don't know, I love this idea of makeup hackers, is that a thing? It's just blown my mind, and it's rad. JamesFLivingstone writes a comment about the importance for makeup and gender expression, and coming from the perspective of a male genderqueer, or male genderqueer-ish. I can fully respect the complicated nature of gender identity, that it can be one of a few things that will make you feel like you look the way that you feel on the inside, and also talks about this idea that I love, that if they are wearing makeup, it signals something about their environment, that it signals that it is a comfortable place for them to be, and that is something that I really love. This was a great comment. Thank you for writing this. This week's episode was brought to you by the hard work of these teleporter selves. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit, links in the doobly-doo, and the tweet of the week comes from Talzier, who wrote a great comment comparing makeup to a sand mandala, these things that Tibetan monks make out of sand, these amazing, immaculate shapes that they then just brush away, right? It's about the impermanence of beauty and so many other things, which by itself is a great comment and a great tweet, but then it got picked up by a SPAMBOT, I don't know, program, company, whoever makes the spam, and it has been tweeted at me no fewer than, I would say, 20 or 30 times over the last week. And the best part is that all of the SPAMBOT profiles that are made, the Twitter bio all say the same thing, often imitated, never duplicated. Oh, and also, we're still accepting record covers if you want to send us things to put on the now slightly larger record corner. We received some things like this awesome Hall & Oates LP, and not quite an LP cover, but from a fake band, The Bathrooms. Love it, amazing, definitely going up on the wall. The address is in the doobly-doo, certain restrictions apply, we gotta keep your stuff and all this other, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, send us things. And one last thing, in case you were wondering, this episode of Idea Channel was brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an easy way to create a website, blog, or store for you and your ideas. Squarespace features a user-friendly interface, custom templates, and 24/7 customer support. Try Squarespace at squarespace.com/ideachannel for a special offer. Squarespace, build it beautiful.